From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and John Meoli live on a Thursday in October, a very spooky edition of the Banner Baseball Show. We're a day away from Halloween. We are live on Facebook, X, and YouTube. Like, rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff wherever you can find it. Rare afternoon show for us. John accommodating my schedule with the Ravens game being tonight. I'm going to have to podcast again in like 10 hours. So this is appreciated, John. We did get a review from our last episode, from Andrew Cosentino, who writes, "No one covers Baltimore sports better than the Banner. They always provide deep insights that many others overlook. Whether it's spring training, the dog days of summer, or the winter hot stove, there are always new episodes to keep fans up to date with the latest Orioles happenings. Moreover, Paul is an exceptional host." Thank you very much, Andrew.
You are a good host, Paul.
Thank you very much, John. And with a name like Cosentino, perhaps Andrew could get involved at the ground level of our Mancano and Meoli deli that we are trying to begin and operate in Baltimore.
Did you know that my dad works at a deli right now?
No.
It's not like his, obviously, but it basically could be. There's like a deli in town that his friend used to run. And now his friend
in Baltimore?
No, in Connecticut.
Oh,
this is
gotcha.
go for Connecticut Deli Unlimited, Deli U as it's known.
Deli Unlimited,
colloquially.
Yeah.
Colloquially.
Nice job.
Yeah, he used to just retired. He would just go there every single day and just be there for long enough where you would think that he worked there, and then all of a sudden he started working there.
Wow. So no wonder you have an appreciation for fine Italian meats.
Yeah, I do have. Yeah, this is like Arby's. We've got the meats.
Yeah. Well, you
Not
just
a sponsor, but could be.
Could be. You just gave away the fact that, as you have said on this podcast before, you are a New Englander, much like the Orioles' new manager, who sports a thick New England accent. Boston, perhaps.
Yeah.
What do you think of Craig Albernaz's new manager, Craig Albernaz's accent?
It's distinctive. It's
certainly distinctive.
Yeah, I think I saw that his wife posted on Twitter, or the platform formerly known as Twitter, that she's from Philly, he's from Massachusetts, they've lived in Australia, and then she learned there's a Baltimore accent and she wants to know what her kids are going to sound like.
Yes.
And to that I say, so do I. So do I.
Yeah, she said dad from Massachusetts, mom from Pennsylvania. Kids have lived in Australia, the West Coast, and the Midwest. Now I'm learning there's a Baltimore accent. There is, in fact, a Baltimore accent, Mrs. Albernaz. The diverse dialect has these Albie kids. They will be elite. I'm fascinated to see. Also, in hearing Craig Albernaz talk, he has kind of the same style of talking as Brandon Hyde. There are a lot of similarities. Both former catchers, both bald guys who were formerly bench coaches, and they both have a distinct, this kind of thick way of speaking with this deep barrel-chested voice.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, we haven't heard Craig Albernaz speak to his players yet, but
he calls them his boys. I have noticed that from a few interviews.
Love that.
We're going to get a lot of that. The boys are out there. They're battling.
Yeah, that makes my ears perk up. Love hearing about the boys. But Brandon Hyde, when he would talk to the players, we saw it a little bit in celebration speeches, but when you see him addressing the team on the backfields or whatever at spring training, it was the same cadence, but a half an octave higher and a lot louder. And it was just very interesting to hear. I'm wondering if we're going to get the same thing.
Yeah, we'll find out. On this episode, we are going to talk more about the addition of Craig Albernaz as the Orioles' new manager, talk about what he brings to the table, why the Orioles selected him as the guy to lead the franchise forward, and we'll talk about some changes that are already coming to Craig Albernaz's coaching staff and what could be on the horizon there. But first, John, I did an episode with Andy Kuska on Monday to react to this hiring. Now let's dive more into this hiring. You wrote a piece on thebanner.com where people can subscribe $1 for 6 months about the news, which is now official. Orioles are going to officially introduce him on Tuesday to the Baltimore media. Most important thing that I've learned, John, in reading up about Craig Albernaz is that he's a sugar fiend.
Okay.
As am I. So you like Italian meats. I prefer desserts. That's just where we stand. That's why I was most interested in gelato when you went to Italy. In reading about Craig Albernaz over the last few weeks, we've all kind of gained an idea of who he is as a manager. or who he is as a coach and who he could be as a manager. First, let's talk about who he isn't, though. He is not four-time World Series winner Bruce Bochy. He is not an experienced big league manager like Scott Servais or Luis Rojas. He is not future Baseball Hall of Famer Albert Pujols. But what he is somebody that the Orioles believe can bring them over the hump, through the playoffs, and to a World Series. John, you wrote in that story, the Orioles had a choice between hiring a manager who could wrap a World Series ring on the table upon being introduced to the city and his new club, or they could go with one that they were more convinced could help them win a ring before long. Why do you think they chose the latter?
I think they chose the latter because this is not about just winning this year to them. You know, I think everything that's happened, even as they're making trades in 2024 to try to bolster a contender, even as they're trying to navigate this new world of not being a team that has no money from ownership anymore. Like, it's all been done with an eye towards, like, let's be good for a long time. Will seasons like 2025 happen? Absolutely. Is the hope to be good enough and deep enough and sustainable enough where that doesn't happen, where you don't need to, where you don't need to do a bunch of quick fixes and change who you are? The hope is always that they can kind of build this organically and sustainably. So when you look at it through that lens, it makes a lot of sense that they would do what they think is right for the 2026 team, and also try to pick somebody who could be the manager here for a decade. I think we said that about some of the more experienced candidates like Rocco Baldelli, who's not an old guy, but had the experience. And I think as we were kind of talking, and we listened to Mike Elias, he said experience will play a big factor in this. And I think everyone rightfully took that as they were going to try to pounce on somebody who has managed a ton. And I think as the process and the managerial cycle went on, and I wrote this, and it's in the lost dead column graveyard. Didn't get to see the light of day, but it felt like the game was going in a different direction than that. The Angels are going to do whatever they're going to do, but like the Giants hiring Tony Vitello from University of Tennessee, that's a long-term play, and just as conventional as hiring like a Bruce Bochy if he comes on the market because you want somebody who can win and can show your guys how to win. It's also pretty conventional to hire the best bench coach or rising managerial candidate you can. And the Orioles did that. So they didn't stray too far from, I guess, the norm, and like kind of, they kind of hit this higher down the middle of the fairway. They didn't try to do anything crazy, but they did something that fits who they are and I think who they want to be.
Yeah, you see some more long-term plays like the guy that the Nationals just hired as well.
Yes.
One of the youngest managers in the last 50 years in baseball. That is certainly a move that will raise some eyebrows, and it's intended to win them a lot of baseball games, maybe not in 2026, but down the road.
Yeah.
A move that they make now that could take its lumps and may look bad in the short term, but ultimately could bear fruit in the long term. If you hire somebody like Bruce Bochy or, somebody like Joe Girardi, you are hiring somebody who you think is going to get you over the hump now. Yeah. The Orioles are in this kind of weird middle ground because they do want to win now, but at the same time, a lot of the guys that they have in place here are going to be here for the next few years. And it's also not like they were right there last year. It's not like they were in the ALCS and just a few pitches here or there and a few bad decisions bump them out.
Yeah.
They won 75 games last year. So they need to make significant improvements. And that has to come not only in the guys that they bring in, but in the way that they approach the game. And that's why I think Craig Albernaz is kind of the middle ground between those two. He's not somebody who's on the verge of retirement, who's won several World Series rings and just needs to take this perennial playoff contender over the hump. But he's also not somebody who is totally fresh, totally young and inexperienced. He has a good resume behind him. I mean, being a bench coach for a year, being an associate manager, coming from all these forward-thinking organizations, he kind of strikes a nice chord between the two sides. And I think that's kind of where the Orioles are right now, because they want to build this sustainable winner, as you said, John. They don't want to necessarily, they want to win in 2026, but then they want to be winning in 2027, 2028 and beyond.
Yeah. And that's something that, it's going to be interesting, like most things are, to kind of keep an eye on the reality. It's that Michael Elias got promoted last year. There's more. They're even more entrenched than they were 2 years. Like, this is a group that is very convicted in what they believe and how they want to do things, and
has support of the ownership group.
And I think the challenge is not to change who they are. It's going to be to adjust to the new reality that they're in. This was 5 years ago and the Orioles are, had to get rid of Brandon Hyde for some reason, and John Angelo still owns a team, and you think they're going to have to win at the margins, then you look at this hire, and not to say that it's bad now, it's not bad at all, but it would be like, wow, what a great, they're really leaning into who they are. This is a team that's still going to make a bunch of waiver claims this offseason and sign a bunch of minor league free agents who they think have a little chance to pop. And they're going to probably do big boy stuff too, but they're also going to do that Rays, Cleveland, Milwaukee type little stuff too. And they're not going to lose sight of that. And I think this is a move that also tells you that they still have a high level of conviction in the players that they have. And this is somebody who, when you hear about how he is with the boys, when you hear about how he is as a, an instructor, as a fundamentals focused baseball guy, like somebody who's going to help get the most out of the players that are in the room, that is priority number 1, 2, and 3 of the next Orioles manager. And this is a move that shows the Orioles value that, and his hiring kind of signals that they think he's the guy to do that.
Right. And you said, John, this is an Orioles front office that, for all the heat that they have taken publicly for how this past year went, on an internal perspective, they're clearly very secure in their job statuses. They are clearly not feeling defensive at all, because if they were, they might have gone out and tried to hire the biggest name possible, the guy who is going to give them the highest ceiling in the short term, just for 2026, just to say, let's get to 95 wins. Let's get to 90 wins. Let's get back in the dance right away. And if it blows up in our face, and if this guy retires in 2 years, who cares? Because we're going to be fired anyway.
Yeah.
That's not how this front office feels. Michael Elias, as you said, just got a promotion. He is no longer just the GM. He is the president of baseball operations. He is an entrenched person at the top of the hierarchy here. Yeah. So he feels like, hey, I can hire somebody and we'll give it 3 or 4 years and we'll see how it works. And if it doesn't work out, I might be the guy that pulls the string on the next manager. I might be the guy that makes the decision on who's here next. Whether that's true or not, the Orioles feel, clearly Michael Elias does not feel the pressure that much in terms of winning in the short term. I think that he would like to, I think he's going to try to, but he's not going to sell the future just to get some more wins in 2026.
Yeah. And, there are less durable ways to do that. You can spend money, you can make trades, like that can help this to 2026 team too. And then you can have a manager who's going to be able to grow with the team that you have and leverage his experience doing the things that this team needs to do to make sure that a season like this doesn't happen. And, I've been talking to some people around the game and around the organization over the last couple of weeks, and especially this week after this happened. And, one person pointed out, look at that 18-inning game and how many good plays there, how many great baseball plays there were in that World Series game. Guys, perfect cuts and relays, like guys throwing to the right, you guys making all these plays. Like, it's all well and good to hit a bunch of home runs, and it's also imperative to win at the highest level to do all those little things. It doesn't seem like from everything we've learned about Craig Albernaz that he's going to let a lot of things slide. And when you think back to what ultimately helped tank this team season, like, the pitching was brutal, like Charlie Morton, yada yada yada, everybody got hurt, but like they also played really bad baseball at the beginning of the season. And that is the durable thing about this. Brandon Hyde lost his job after a game in which they just like didn't do a bunch of stuff they should have done, and the owner sitting right behind home plate, and then all of a sudden he doesn't have a job anymore. That is the impression of like the bad that the 2025 Orioles left. So we're going in the complete opposite direction for the 2026 team.
Yeah, and it can't all be on the manager, obviously. This is super incumbent upon the players to fix this. But in an interview, I think at the end of last season, so we're talking really only about a month or two ago, with Craig Albernaz that the Cleveland media did, he was talking about the importance of fundamentals. And he said, this is something that is never going to go away in the game of baseball. And for sure, the Orioles did not play fundamental baseball in 2025. And I know that's a buzzword, but like you said, John, there were a lot of times where they were thrown to the wrong guy, making the wrong decisions in the outfield, where they were making errors in the field, where they were not doing the smart, basic things that you need to do to win games. And watching that 18-inning game, I couldn't imagine the Orioles playing that kind of game. This iteration of the Orioles playing that kind of game in the World Series on that stage. They weren't doing it all season. They didn't play tight games like that. The hope is that Craig Albernaz is going to be that guy that can instill those kind of things. And think about the kind of wear and tear that game also had on the catchers. Talking about Craig Albernaz knows a lot about catchers. I know that that's not going to be his only responsibility. He's going to be much higher than that. But as he gets to oversee Samuel Basayo's development and Adley Rutschman, who the Orioles hope is going to get back to himself, it makes sense that Albernaz would be the guy that the Orioles wouldn't trust with that.
Yeah.
You mentioned also in your story about the organizations that Craig Albernaz has been a part of. Really all goes back to his playing days in the Tampa Bay Rays organization, which is, as we know, steeped in analytics. That certainly checks a box for Mike Elias, being on the cutting edge of all the latest technology. Then in San Francisco, that was a young, dynamic staff that Gabe Kapler put there, and a bunch of guys that were going to be future managers. They had maybe a few sensibilities for older, experienced coaches, but it was pretty young. It was pretty wet behind the ears, and it worked out great in the season where they won over 100 games, and it didn't work out great after that.
Yeah.
But that's a team that was still trying to utilize a lot of the new technology, a lot of the new analytics in the game. They had a much higher payroll than Tampa Bay Rays or some of the other small market teams, but they were still trying to go back to, that kind of young, dynamic future of the game look.
Yeah.
And then most recently, Cleveland. And this is the organization that I think mirrors the Orioles the most right now. Lower payroll, but a team that needs to grind out, as you said, every in-game and strategic advantage to help homegrown players reach their potential. That is exactly what the Orioles are hoping to do. Now, you'd hope, as an Orioles fan, that David Rubenstein would open up the checkbook a little bit more and get that payroll into the top 10 and not be consistently in the bottom third like Cleveland usually is.
Yeah.
But it's a team full of homegrown players. And this is a team in the Orioles that is going to be homegrown for the foreseeable future. And they need to grind out every little advantage. They did it in 2023. They did it to some extent in 2024. They didn't do it at all in 2025. And that's the hope, is that Craig Albernaz has learned something from each one of these stops, Tampa Bay, San Francisco, and Cleveland, that he can bring to the Orioles.
Yeah. And a lot of these things that we're talking about, the Orioles have known and have executed. We talk about having somebody kind of steering the ship who is of a player development mind, has been on staffs where you bring players through your system and you continue their development in the majors and you make them contributors and you help them play winning baseball. That's what he's done at all these stops. And the Giants, they took it to an extreme with a very young staff of people who came from non-traditional roles to the major league roles they ended up taking. And that was kind of like an all-star staff. The guys the hitting coaches ended up being with Texas when they won the World Series. Kai Correa is going to be a manager soon. Craig Albernaz is a manager. You can go on and on with this group.
It was like the Oklahoma City Thunder before James Harden gets traded and Kevin Durant leaves and Russell Westbrook leaves.
Yeah, and there's all these tentacles, but the Orioles knew that. Brandon Hyde was a player development, manager. They have put people on their staffs, in the fundamental side, in the game planning side, in the hitting side, and the pitching side, who came through the farm system with these guys and are there to help them continue their development once they reach the big leagues. They know that you need to continue to get players better. That needs to happen regardless of whether they sign a top 5 free agent pitcher and a top 5 free agent hitter to join this team. You can do that whether you have good coaches or bad coaches. Any team can spend money. The Angels spend money. They do a bunch of dumb stuff. All these teams, anyone could spend money, but to have the infrastructure in place to help everyone there get better. I'm thinking about, I don't know why I'm thinking about it, but I'm thinking about a new fresh voice getting in Tyler O'Neill's ear and being like, hey, dude, like you can do this. You've been like in the mix for Gold Gloves before. Like you are an athlete. Like, why is this what we're seeing? Like, let's go, and not in a chastising way, but like talking to him like one of the boys, like, let's go. Like that type of stuff is going to be so valuable to making this team a success if it is one. And I think there's a lot of experience there. I'm not sure how many, I don't know what I'm not sure how many in the last generation of baseball will say, like how many people got their start being like minor league coaches and managers in their 20s. Probably not as many as do now.
Yeah.
That seems fair to say. So when we talk about experience, somebody who's in their early 40s and has like 10 years of coaching, player development, managing at different levels, like that's not nothing.
Yeah.
That's significant. If you superimpose that against somebody who became a minor league coach in the 1990s in their 40s, then they become a managerial candidate in their 50s after they paid their dues. People are just paying their dues earlier.
Yeah. Three things also in the last couple weeks as we have learned more and more about Craig Albernaz have stuck out to me. And I think they are three positives. One is the fact that he was wanted by other teams. He has interviewed a bunch of places for their managerial openings. In fact, he interviewed with Cleveland, according to that great story on The Athletic, to be their manager when they hired Stephen Vogt. And it was Stephen Vogt, who obviously his best friend, who brought him along to be the bench coach at that point. Doesn't tell you everything. A lot of the highly sought after coaches or managers end up being busts. But it is something that a lot of teams around the game, a lot of organizations respected what Craig Albernaz brought to the table and wanted to gain insight from him.
Yeah.
The second thing is he has been lauded for the tight relationships that he has made with players. And that's something that the Orioles desperately need. Their manager has to be on the same page as their players. And that doesn't necessarily mean they have to agree on everything and see eye to eye. The manager needs to be able to, as you said, John, push players when they need to be pushed. And not just the young guys who need to develop, but some of the veterans as well, who the Orioles will certainly bring in here during this offseason, some that are already in the building.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is that he is a former player. I think that that's something that we talked about when we were talking about Albert Pujols maybe being hired, is that having somebody who's said, hey, I've been through the wars before. No, I never reached the big leagues, but I played a long time in the minor leagues. I know what it takes. And I know what we're asking of you. When we ask you to make changes to your game, or we ask you to do something that you're not comfortable with, I know how difficult that is. And I've been there and I've done it before. So those are three things that I think certainly were attractive to the Orioles about Craig Albernaz too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I'm excited. I'm interested to hear what they have to say about it, because we know some of the people they've interviewed and probably not all of them. We know some of the things they were looking for, but probably not all of them. It seems like, Albernaz is a box checker. He checked a lot of boxes of what they're looking for. And that's not to say the other candidates weren't, but you end up with somebody who, nobody's going to like tweet, oh, heard the Orioles blew this hire. There's a lot of questions about it. Like, you don't know, because this person is not, we'll know if he's a good manager based on how many games the Orioles win and lose.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it. If they lose more games than they win over the next couple of years, he might be a good manager, but it's not going to be, that will be a reflection on him. It's more about like satisfying what you're looking for. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how the differences of the last era of Orioles baseball in this area are contrasted, because that's what happens. We went down to spring training in 2019 for Brandon Hyde's first spring training, and it was like, there was music playing while they were stretching and working out, and Buck Showalter never let that happen.
Yeah.
When these guys showed up, there were hedges blocking the media and anyone from seeing what was happening in like the 6-pack of bullpen mounds, and they just chopped them down because it was stupid. Like, they changed it, and like they were doing short workouts because it was a waste of time to be there for like 5 hours, and like they were doing shorter workouts, and it came to us in the media that they didn't want it to seem like it was summer camp down there, but compared to what it kind of was summer camp. And then things change, and spring training changes and all that changes, and what we will find out is what the players thought about how it was, because they'll say things like, it's more relaxed, or it's more strict and we need that, or
Right.
it's more tailored to me, or it's more it's going to be more of some things, less of some things, and that's going to be how we find out the difference in what this team felt like they needed, because that's what they're going to focus on.
Yeah, what I'm excited about is he apparently is, according to that story in The Athletic, an Energizer bunny. He's energetic. He works all hours of the night. He brings a level of levity to the game as well. I'm excited to get to talk to him and to get to see what kind of approach he takes with his team, because we saw that the job, especially in the first few years of the rebuild, wear on Brandon Hyde. I mean, by the end of, if he had hair, it would have gone gray because of the amount of losing and bad baseball that he had to deal with. He aged like a president in the first few years of his Orioles tenure. Hopefully, Craig Albernaz will not have to deal with that, but to bring in fresh energy and a fresh voice. And I think that also plays into why the Orioles didn't go with Tony Mansolino. And it's nothing against Tony Mansolino and the job that he did in the second half, but they wanted to bring somebody in from outside the organization, given how disastrous this season went. I think that that's perfectly understandable too.
Yeah. And I would just say to that point, this was a team that came up with, and like, the reason that the bird bath exists is because these guys did like a silly, Andy wrote about it, a silly like water ballet for the team talent show. They were absolute like
numbskulls.
Goofs. Yeah. They're just like positive. And you could watch this team, when they walked in those jumpsuits. Like I don't remember where I was. I wasn't in town, but I saw it and I showed my wife. I was like, these guys are like such idiots.
They look like Teletubbies.
Yeah, but like they did stuff like that because it was fun and it was funny and they were having a good time. Yes, they were losing and like everyone's trying to like figure out their own stuff, but like how much better will the Orioles play baseball and the Orioles be as a team if they're like back to having fun?
I mean, we were talking at the beginning of spring training about is the Orioles are a close-knit group. A lot of the players on this, especially the position players, are very tight, and they have their spring training house together, and they love playing Mario Kart, and they love playing Catan, and they're best buds, and they fish all the time. And how much does that really matter? It certainly helps. But then they started losing games, and it's not as much fun. It's hard to have fun with your buddies when you're losing as many games, and when guys are out of the lineup, and guys are on rehab assignments and not playing for you. Let's bring that funness back. And that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be touched with some maturity and some understanding of we need to get to work when we need to get to work. These guys are older now than they were when they were rookies. But it also shouldn't be taken like everything is the end of the world and this is the most serious game that they can possibly play. They need to be able to have fun and enjoy what they're doing. And I think that perhaps Craig Albernaz is that guy who can help them do that.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about the coaching staff that Craig Albernaz is going to assemble here, because we've already seen some turnover on that coaching staff. Per Andy Kuska of the Baltimore Banner, assistant hitting coach and upper-level hitting coordinator Sherman Johnson has left to take a job with the Chicago White Sox as their minor league hitting coordinator. He joins old Orioles co-hitting coach Ryan Fuller in Chicago, and assistant hitting coach Tommy Joseph is also not returning. Cody Ashley's former teammate in Philadelphia that he brought in here. When you look at the job that Sherman Johnson and Tommy Joseph did in Baltimore, John, they were both kind of brought in. Sherman Johnson's time with the Orioles had predated Cody Ashley's promotion to hitting coach, so he just kind of got promoted when Cody Ashley got promoted, when Ryan Fuller and Matt Borg-Schulte left town after the 2024 season. But the Orioles are already making some changes, whether that's the Orioles making those decisions or the people themselves, Sherman Johnson and Tommy Joseph making those decisions. But do you think this is a reflection of the Orioles not wanting those specific messengers, or the Orioles not wanting that specific message?
That is the question to me. This time last year, I don't think we were regularly podcasting, but we were regularly, I'm sure if we had this conversation this time last year, I would have, stuck my neck out and said, I did it in writing. I don't know if I did in podcast form. They're not changing anything. It might be different people. They're not changing anything. We're talking about like situational hitting that failed them. Like, you're not going to blow up the program based on a half season that went badly, because that's what it was. And, Ryan Fuller left on his own volition. Matt Borgschulte left on his own volition. Would there have been changes? Would the Orioles have had to make a tough decision if those things didn't happen? Maybe. But they had Cody Ashley already in the mix. They had Sherman Johnson, who's an awesome guy who they really wanted to have in the mix. He gets the job. Like, that's what, that's how this goes. They kept things very same. Cody Ashley said in spring training, we're basically doing all the same stuff. Like, these guys aren't seeing anything different than what they were used to before. And that was because they believe in everything they believe in and they believe that it works. This feels to me, and I've gotten mixed messages just kind of as to what all this means, but this feels like to me the potential to be a significant kind of moment. And, you're not going to do anything more impactful than hire a good manager who can manage this team for a decade and help, win a playoff game, win a playoff series, win a World Series. Sure, that's very impactful, but to the extent this organization has been defined by anything over the since Michael Elias was hired at the end of 2018, it's been like, we're going to identify really good hitters and we're going to fill our draft boards with them and we're going to take the best ones we can and we're going to get them to the big leagues because we know what to do with them. We have a philosophy. If you will OPS the best and thereby score the most runs if you swing a good pitches. If you hit the ball in the air, you hit the ball hard. That's been what's defined them. They have done this since the beginning of 2020 with COVID through now, and it's been some changing faces and different chefs, but the same menu. They're cooking the same menu. That's what they're doing. They're doing the same drills in Delmarva as they are in Baltimore. The process and the program is exactly the same. To turn this over, to turn this over for the second time in 2 years, in a way that it didn't feel this way last year, feels like there's a chance that things could be somehow different. How different? What could be different? I don't know. You're probably not going to bring in like a traditional, like, let's stick the bat out there and put the ball in play and scrap it out type, like old school hitting philosophy guys. Everyone is working off the same set of data. The reason the Orioles do the things that they have done is because over time, that is the most productive way to consistently score runs. And this was like the best offense in baseball in the first half of 2024, and it hasn't been since. So you can't say it never worked. These 3 of those players that they drafted and developed were all-stars. But you're talking about the same sets of data and the same handful of ways to interpret that and deliver the message that you want to deliver. And it feels like this, just the fact that there's a chance that it could be different feels significant to me because that's not really how they do things. They haven't really done a lot of wholesale changes. I guess you could say they have on the pitching side. Oh, like they've kind of pivoted, but that felt more like accelerating what they were already doing. They don't need to really do that. They've done the hitting thing pretty well. Now are they going to change that? I don't know.
Yeah, at the end of 2024, there were certainly a lot of fans that were frustrated with the hitting side of things because that was the part of the project that failed the most down the stretch. When they went 500 after the All-Star break, and then they get swept out of the playoffs and they don't hit at the right time. There were a lot of fans that were frustrated, but you look at that season as a whole and you say the statistics were really good. You still had some good performances here and there. You could blame some of it on injuries and, Adley Rutschman dealing with injuries and Jordan Westberg breaking his hand for the second half and all that stuff. And you could say this process just needs to be tweaked. It doesn't need to be overhauled. Well, they made some tweaks and they lose both of their co-hitting coaches, and they promote Cody Ashley, and they send that same message. And whether it was the message, the messenger, or the receiver of the message, they didn't have those kind of results. Or whether it was just bad luck. The Orioles finished 24th in baseball with a .235 batting average, 21st in baseball with a .699 OPS. Their 18.5% line drive percentage was the second lowest in the majors, had a low walk rate, 22nd in the big leagues at 8%, and struck out 24.2% of the time, which was the third highest. All these stats per Andy Kuska. Those numbers will not be acceptable if they do that again in 2026.
Yeah.
Is your diagnostic levels, John? Do you think it was the messengers, the message, the receiver, the message, or just bad luck? We had this conversation like halfway through the season, and we couldn't really come to a consensus at that point. But if you're doling out blame pie, who gets the biggest slice?
I don't think the hitting coaches or the hitting program are the big slices. I'm not saying this is all the players' fault. I'm not saying this is all luck fault, but like all the fault of luck. But how do you even evaluate? Like, sure, whatever happened in the first couple months, like they didn't hit. They also faced like every all-star lefty there was twice in the span of 2 months. Like the Orioles played all these teams and like saw all these guys multiple times, and they got destroyed by them. And yeah, that shouldn't have happened because they signed all these right-handed hitters. We don't have to do this whole thing again. But as a team offensively, by the end of the season, there's something, in spring training, you have to bring what's called like a representative lineup on the road. You can't just send the Bowie or the Chesapeake Bay Sox to Bradenton to play the Pirates, because people pay money for those tickets, and you have to have like a certain amount of major leaguers in your lineup. And if you don't have that many major leaguers in your lineup, you get fined by the league. And like, there were probably times when the Orioles ran out lineups during the regular season after the trade deadline where they would have gotten fined for not having representative, could establish major leaguers in their lineup, because they traded a lot of guys and a lot of guys were hurt and not playing well and like in and out. Like, how do you evaluate? Are we saying like because Dylan Carlson got like 200 plate appearances and went like 2 different months without getting a hit, like the hitting program is bad, like
because Luis Vasquez played 32 games, because Jacob Stallings and Chadwick Trump had to be behind home plate,
we could go on forever. And like, yes, did Gunnar Henderson not have the season he was supposed to? Yes. Was Adley Rutschman underperforming until he got hurt? Yes. Jordan Westberg was pretty good while he was healthy. Colton Cowser was not that good, and turned out he wasn't healthy. Jackson Holiday grinded through. I don't even know what to make of Jackson Holiday. So you can't. I wouldn't say that's because. I wouldn't say that's because of the coaching or the players. It was just a brutal set of circumstances that kind of led to this. And the question is always, to me, like, what could happen differently? Like, what do you think the Yankees hitting coaches are telling their guys? Don't hit the ball hard in the air. Don't swing at pitches you think you can drive. Like, this is what you do. This is how things go. Can you do things a little differently? Sure. I mean, there's a lot of like contact oriented little slug guys in Toronto who were like fringe contributors who got their bat speed up and started hitting the ball harder. And then they had a much better offense this year than last year. You can do that type of stuff, but that's not to say that the Orioles don't do that. They do train bat speed. They do train this stuff. And they were dealing, I feel like, with the worst of circumstances offensively for a variety of reasons. And I'm not answering your question, but it's just not easy to say. It's not easy to say like, oh, if the hitting coaches were different, the season goes different.
Right.
That's obviously not true.
Yeah. So many other things would have had to be different.
And I guess that's the point. Like, would this season have gone differently if there were different hitting coaches? Probably not. And like, that's all you need to know. So are these guys leaving on their own volition? Are they being scapegoated? Are the Orioles going to double down a third time and be like, well, no, what we're doing still works. Let's change it. Let's change the chefs again. Like, that feels like it would be tricky too. They almost have to make a big pivot, but I don't know what direction that would be. But it feels like the fact that we're having this conversation is meaningful.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the fans look at the fact that Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, Colton Cowser, Ryan Mountcastle, Jordan Westberg have all been very, very good players in the past with supreme offensive seasons. And in 2025, a lot of those guys didn't. And you look at the downtick in production and you say, well, what's the one common denominator? And that's the coaching staff. That's the hitting coaches. And I think that their natural inclination is to then blame the hitting coaches in that instance. But it's not all one size fits all. It's not, all on one guy, all on two guys. It's not all Ryan Fuller and Matt Borg-Schulte's fault, as we all saw. Those guys that walked out the door. And by the same token, it's not all Tommy Joseph and Cody Ashley and Sherman Johnson's fault. I just am interested to see who, assuming Cody Ashley stays on as the hitting coach, what kind of assistance he is going to get and how much Craig Albernaz has to say in that. Is he going to give, if Cody Ashley stays, is he going to give Cody Ashley carte blanche to go out in there and pick whoever he wants as his assistants? Or is he going to say, hey, let's have some conversations about what kind of messengers we want to bring in here and who your assistants should be? And is Mike Elias going to be involved in those conversations? I mean, he'll be involved at some level, but is he going to put his thumb on the scale and say, I want this kind of guy in this role? It's all going to be a fascinating process, and we won't know the answers, probably won't know the answers for a while. It's going to take a while for the coaching staff to be filled out. In terms of who is still in-house right now, you still have Tony Mansolino on the coaching staff technically, but he is not expected to be back per Andy Kuska. Bench coach Robinson Chirinos. I am also curious if the Orioles bring in an associate manager over Robinson Chirinos, because maybe there's somebody out there that, Craig Albernaz was the best buddy of Stephen Vogt, and Stephen Vogt just brought him in to be his bench coach. Is there a best buddy, a third best buddy in this group that Craig Albernaz wants to bring in to be his associate manager?
Seems like Blake Butera from the Nats is like another of the, the coaching tree is already there. So he might have lost his associate manager already.
He might have. Also, I did look up the difference because I was curious about the difference between associate and assistant. This is per Indeed.com. An associate position is typically an entry-level hourly rate common among retail personnel. I don't think that Craig Albernaz was getting an hourly rate.
I hope not.
An Alberly rate. Assistant position typically requires extensive job experience and may require a degree because of their level of responsibility and authority. Kind of makes sense, I guess, for Craig Albernaz. So he was the bench coach in 2024. Then Stephen Vogt promotes him to associate manager, in part to keep him from taking a job with the Chicago White Sox or Miami Marlins, we assume, because he was interviewing for those jobs. But he doesn't have like a ridiculous amount of experience as a bench coach, so it kind of makes sense that he was an associate more as opposed to an assistant, right?
Yeah. Honestly, like those sound like they were job descriptions like written by AI, and not a lot makes me feel comfortable about my, the status of being a writer.
All titles are fake.
Yeah, everything's made up.
But I could see, another guy being added either as an assistant or an associate. You still have hitting coach Cody Ashley. You still have pitching coach Drew French. You have interim bullpen / assistant pitching coach Mitch Plasmeyer, interim third base / infield coach Buck Britton, first base coach Anthony Sanders, pitching strategy coach Ryan Klimek, major league development coach Grant Anders, senior advisor John Mabry. When you look at this staff, John, we might see more turnover in the staff. But do you think that when he is assembling his staff, that Craig Albernaz needs to go out there, because he is not an experienced big league manager, and hire an experienced big league manager on this staff? Because there's nobody on this group that fits that bill.
I'm going to say no, because that feels like the right answer to me. Doesn't feel like a job or a role or a set of responsibilities unless you bring something other than having managed to the table that is useful. If we're talking about like a super high energy, hands-on teacher type coach, that's what he's going to want with his staff. He's going to want those kind of he's going to want everything to be like buzzing around. And if you have some guy who's not that type, who's older and is hardened and is looking at you askance because you're doing all this wild stuff, it's just not like what's the value of that other than he's done it before. Like that's Craig Albernaz's job to be the manager. It's not somebody else's job to be the manager with him. Like that's his job. He's going to do the managing, and that I'm sure he will hire a staff that is or assemble or cobble together a staff that is full of people who can execute the tasks and the roles that he wants. And I don't know if the first thing I would do if I was hired to do a job would be to hire my own babysitter.
Well, I wonder how much power Craig Albernaz is going to have in terms of hiring his own staff. How much of this is going to be the front office's decision?
Yeah.
Because when Brandon High got hired, he said, well, I'm bringing over Tim Cousins. He's my best buddy. And then Mike Elias was like, that's nice, but we're going to fill out the rest of your staff.
And let's remember too, that was in December.
Yeah, true.
Baseball contracts, if you are a coach getting renewed, if a team wants you back, yeah, you can hire people for promotions, I suppose. But if they wanted to hire some teams, some hotshot assistant pitching coach to be the Orioles pitching coach, I suppose they could have. But what they did was they just hired a bunch of people who were out of a job because those were the guys that were available by and large.
Yeah.
I might be misspeaking on one or two specific people, but that's basically what they did.
Yeah. And the staff looked very different the
second they had the opportunity to turn some of those roles over, they did. Yeah. And nobody was bad. It was just...
The team was bad.
It's just, except for, there were some bad players. But things change quickly. I mean, the pitching side feels like nothing's going to happen to those guys. I feel like those guys are back, and I don't think there's a ton of reason to not have any of them back unless they decide to take other jobs where there is confirmed turnover, maybe not full, maybe full. There is turnover though on the hitting side that feels like it will be more collaborative than just Craig Albernaz being like, I know these guys. I think he's going to be, he's obviously in that room. He's obviously having those conversations, but I think I think Andy reported / confirmed, and there's been other reports that the Orioles are letting Anthony Sanders, interview for other jobs if he wants to. Those quote unquote fundamental coaches, like first base, outfield coach, infield. It seems like that is where someone who's coming in like a manager can kind of put their stamp on the staff. That's complicated by Buck Britton and Robinson Chirinos being, recently added in generalist roles and presumably being under contract for next year.
Right.
You can have as many coaches as you want. There's no rules. I think there is a rule, but I don't think the Orioles are close to running up against that rule. And that would be where I would think. But I think I don't know that it's going to be like, I want somebody who does X and Y. I think he's going to be more like, I want you to match, the energy, the vibes,
right?
What we're looking for.
Well, and go back a year's time, and Buck Britton and Robinson Chirinos, have been talking about Buck Britton as the next Orioles manager for years now, it feels like, because of the success he's had in the minor leagues. And Robinson Chirinos was a big get for this Orioles coaching staff, that they were able to kind of win the Robinson Chirinos sweepstakes. He was wanted by other teams to be a bench coach. They gave him a pretty big role for his first major league coaching job.
Yeah.
But presumably he's not on a 1-year contract like Kurt Suzuki. So, those guys are probably under contract and are clearly well thought of by the organization. So going to be interesting. Yeah. But all of this to say, as we stand on the precipice of the end of the World Series and the beginning of free agency, which technically can begin as early as Saturday if the World Series ends on Friday. Free agency begins the day after the World Series ends. So the offseason is right around the corner. All of this to say, the manager hire is a big one. The coaching staff positions are big, and they're important as to how this team is going to look. What's most important is how the players play and who the players are that's on the roster.
Yeah. And, if you are adding whatever you're adding to this roster in free agency trades, like if you're saying, oh, we're going to add 10 wins in talent or in, whatever future value for 2026. The reality is what are you adding that 10 to? If it's the 2025 Orioles with a bunch of underperforming homegrown players, you're still not in a good place. But if you have somebody who can get the most out of those guys and you're talking about a much higher talent base and floor for this team to kind of build off of, then those additions you make will make a difference. I mean, it's a big offseason to say the least. And honestly, my head is spinning with what you just said, that this could all start and free agency starts and then nothing happens. But still the idea of it makes me, it might just be all the caffeine I've had today with the 3:00 record, but making me a little dizzy right now.
The Angels are taking a lot of strays on this podcast, but I feel like free agency opens and the Angels make 4 moves that end up looking terrible.
Yeah. The Angels signing Charlie Morton on the first day of free agency.
That would be.
I know you wanted to retire, Charlie.
Yeah.
I know you basically retired.
Yeah, that would be very Angels. Well, we will have many more podcasts as we get further into the off season, which will officially begin after the postseason ends, and we will have coverage of the Craig Albernaz introductory press conference as well on Tuesday. Probably have a podcast at some point next week to break that down, react to what he said in his strong New England accent. At John Meoli is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at Old Banner Sports. Of course, subscribe to the Banner, $1 for 6 months. Get Inside the Dugout, John's incredible newsletter. We have plenty more coverage there for you. Enjoy Halloween, everybody. John, do you have a costume?
Yeah, we're Zoe is Rumi from K-pop Demon Hunters.
Still haven't seen it.
Did we talk about this already?
Not on air.
Not on air. Yeah. She is a demon hunting K-pop star.
Cool.
Milo is, there's like a little in the movie. There's like a little like demon tiger type thing.
Okay.
It's like a little blue tiger.
Sounds cute.
Yeah, and I'm like, I just spent like $50 at Michael's getting like, I'm gonna like paint some demon patterns onto a sweatshirt. We'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
Just what I need, just like to lock down like my evening and probably deep into the night if we're being completely realistic. On a crafts project, I don't know how I'm gonna do, but
and then you make it, and then you're like, well, I'm gonna wear it for one day, and then it's done forever.
I bought like a medium to high quality like black hoodless sweatshirt to crew neck guy, and
nice. I also bought a hoodie at Michael's.
Yeah, but I was like, I told Meryl, I was like, you play your cards right, this could be your sweatshirt come November 1st. And
That's true.
She was like, I don't want like I'm gonna want a demon pattern sweatshirt, and it's like also fair, but it can't go anywhere. It's something that if it works out the way that I think it will, I will have spent so much time on it that I cannot get rid of it.
Nice.
What's your costume?
My girlfriend and I are going as Wallace and Gromit tomorrow.
Cool.
Great claymation. And over the weekend for a Halloween party, I bought a tan hoodie from Michael's, and we're all green underneath because I was half of the pistachio tide.
Okay. Oh, I get it.
You get it? Yeah.
Smelly,
Very Baltimore reference.
Very Baltimore. Yeah.
Didn't shower that day.
Do you? Sorry for all involved. Are you going somewhere? Are you going to be like out and you're going to be doing candy at the Casa de the Young Sports Boys?
Yes, the Casa de Young Sports Boys. Different from the Casa de Young Sports Boys in Sarasota every spring. This is the Casa de Young Sports Media Boys. We're going to hand out candy. I have never gotten the privilege of handing out candy before because I've always lived in an apartment building. Now I have a house and I get to hand out candy, and I'm deciding what kind of house we want to be. Are we a Kit Kat house? Are we a king size candy bars kind of house? Yeah. We're not a granola bar kind of house.
Yeah, no, just do the candy, Be
what kind of candy?
A lot of little candy. A lot of candy. We have like 4 like Costco size bags.
So like little Snickers and 3 Musketeers and that kind of stuff.
And I like to sit outside longer than, usually like Zoe doesn't last super long. She just turned 5. She'll last longer this year than she has in years past. But like usually the bedtime process starts and I kind of just stay out and like hang out and keep drinking and giving out candy. And like once the candy runs out, you got to go inside. But I kind of like sitting out there and doing it. So
apparently, according to Tony, who's watching live on YouTube and commenting along, he said they've already gone out trick-or-treating last weekend, or I don't know when they would have gone trick-or-treating, but maybe some costume party. So many demon hunters. So that is the costume of this Halloween, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, it's really swept the youth.
It has. All right. I don't know how many people tuned out 5 minutes ago, but thanks for staying to the end. We'll have another podcast for you soon. For John Meoli, I'm Paul Mancano. Enjoy Halloween, everybody, and we'll catch you.